We're always told that saving the planet is, well, it's a problem of technology and policy, right? But what if the real key, the actual missing piece of the puzzle, is something way more fundamental? What if the only real path to a healthy Earth runs directly through a fairer society? I mean, it's a massive question, isn't it? For decades now, we've had all the warnings. We've had international agreements, treaties, targets, incredible green technology, and yet the core problems, they're just getting worse. So this huge gap between knowing what we need to do and actually doing it, well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into right now. Okay, so to even begin to find an answer, we have to be brutally honest with ourselves about the sheer scale of this challenge. And the numbers, whew, they don't just tell a story, they paint a pretty stark picture of a planet that's under some serious strain. Just take a look at this. It really visualizes the two huge crises we're facing. That first bar there, that's atmospheric CO2. It's hit levels we haven't seen in 800,000 years. That's what's supercharging our climate. And that second bar, man, that's something just as devastating. It shows that the very web of life is unraveling, with a truly catastrophic decline in wildlife since just 1970. So you gotta ask, how on earth did we get here? Well, this timeline lays it out. The spark, yeah, that was the Industrial Revolution. But the real explosion, that happened after the 1950s. It was a period scientists actually call the Great Acceleration. This insane surge in population and just stuff brought us to right now, today, what they call the Anthropocene, a whole new geological era, where for the first time, humanity is the single biggest force shaping the entire planet. It's kind of a heavy thought. Okay, so with that pretty heavy context in mind, let's circle back to our big question. If all the tech and all the treaties aren't enough, then what is? Well, the answer might just come from a chance encounter, one that completely changes the conversation. So picture this. A dinner in London. You've got this veteran environmentalist, Tony Juniper, and he's sitting right next to Sweden's former environment minister, a woman named Lena Somestad. And he asks her a pretty simple question. Why is Sweden so far ahead of everyone else on all this green stuff? Clean energy, nature protection, the whole deal. And her answer? Wow. It wasn't about technology. It wasn't about some fancy policy. It wasn't even about some special cultural love for the outdoors. She just said, it's simple. It's because we are so much more equal than you are. And boom, there it is. The idea that a fairer society is a greener society. This is the huge, radical insight that's at the very heart of everything we're talking about today. Okay, but wait, how does that actually work? I mean, how can something like social inequality really put the brakes on environmental action? It feels disconnected, right? Well, it turns out the connections are incredibly deep, they're powerful, and they operate on a whole bunch of different levels. And right away, this gets to the absolute core injustice of the entire crisis. The people who contribute the very least to climate change and pollution, they are the exact same people who get hit first and get hit hardest by all of its effects. Think about that. They didn't cause the storm, but they are absolutely the first ones to face the flood. And this chart, wow, it makes that disparity impossible to ignore. Just look, the wealthiest 1% of people on this planet are responsible for more carbon emissions than the entire bottom 50% of humanity combined. Let that sink in. The top 1% pollutes more than the bottom half of the world's population. It's just the starkest possible illustration of how unequal consumption is driving this whole crisis. But it's not just about the raw numbers. Inequality has this powerful psychological effect, too. In societies where there are really big gaps between the rich and the poor, this thing called status anxiety kicks in. You know the feeling, right? That relentless pressure to keep up with the Joneses. It feels this crazy cycle of overconsumption. We end up buying stuff we don't even need just to show where we fit in the social pecking order. And on top of all that, inequality creates total political gridlock. You see it all the time. Good environmental policies get blocked because of legitimate fears that they'll hurt the poorest people. On the global stage, nations get into these endless standoffs over who should pay for the cleanup. And of course, these divisions get weaponized by politicians. But maybe the most damaging thing of all, it just erodes social trust, that basic feeling that, we're all in this together. And that trust is the absolute bedrock you need for any kind of collective action. So just recognizing that this deadlock exists, that's a huge first step. The next step is to actually build a new path forward, one that stops treating social issues and environmental issues like they're two separate problems. They're not. They are deeply, deeply intertwined, and they have to be solved together. So here's a look at a new framework for the future. Now, the first 5 pillars here are probably going to sound pretty familiar to you. Renewable, sustainable, circular, regenerative, and restorative. We hear those a lot. But it's that 6th pillar, the one that's emphasized here, fairness. That's the one that holds the whole thing together. Because without a just transition, one that brings everyone along, the entire structure just collapses. A new approach like this really needs a new goal, and maybe even a new name. We have to move beyond just chasing endless economic growth on one hand, or just grimly surviving on the other. So the new goal? It's something called thrivalism. It's a vision for a system that isn't just about surviving, it's designed so that all people can genuinely thrive. And this is the key, to do so within the natural limits of our living planet. And all of this brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? This whole idea that the two greatest challenges of our time, environmental collapse and social injustice, they aren't two separate things competing for our attention. They are, when you get right down to it, one and the same fight. This quote from Craig Bennett really just sums it all up perfectly. Social justice and environmental sustainability are indeed two sides of the same precious coin. I mean, for way too long, we've tried to solve the environmental crisis with one hand tied behind our back, right? All while ignoring the social problems that are keeping us completely stuck. So we'll leave you with this final thought. All the evidence seems to point to one thing. A more equal world isn't just some nice moral goal. It's a practical, absolute necessity for our survival. A world with less status anxiety, more trust, and a real sense of shared purpose is a world that can actually face up to the biggest challenge in human history. So the real question is, if a fairer world is the key to saving the planet, what are we waiting for?